And if possible, half an hour, but I know your time is always very precious. So
I don't have plans to go anywhere this evening, nor indeed this week. And I haven't left the house since last Sunday. Um,
it's fair.
I'm pretty flexible at the moment.
Well, I guess we'll keep going until because my my audio lecturer is a big gamer, and I told him I was doing this, and he went, "Oh, even if you can't use it, it'll be amazing to do." And I was like, "Yeah, but you've never heard me speak."
Well, as far as I'm concerned, anything I say in front of a webcam and microphone is, in my mind, fair game, and my
Okay.
fault for saying it if it becomes a problem. And how you share the footage
Time
is
to
fine by me. I don't expect to say anything personal.
no,
And
no,
if I do say something personal, it's probably on purpose.
no. It's fair enough. Time to delete the question about how I buy GP. Then that's not going in.
Unless you buy a girlfriend.
Oh no, I've tried that. They have to pay me to go away half the time. It's a good money maker actually. It's
Ooh.
mm.
I, mean, I suppose that's maybe how the beggars at the Rand Exchange are trying to operate.
Yeah, that's a new Sub Hugger video, I think, right there. Okay, so I guess this is one-off podcast with the lovely Ash, who is also known as God Ash, Mod Ash, Jesus by a few people. I think they're probably non-religious, but there we go. I'm sure there's a passage in the Old Testament about you somewhere. Old Testament of Gillenor.
I think when the Bible talks about ash, it's normally talking about bad things happening to people, or maybe having it daubed on one's head or something like that, rather than the idea of worshipping it.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure many of the players probably are quoting the Bible when they tweet, but there may be a few.
I like to see how many have actually picked up on the very obscure references to religious culture. Like a player actually identified that the Nilocus in the Theatre of Blood, they've got names taken from Greek words. And the player noticed that we've got Nilocus Hagios, Nilocus Athanatos, Nilocus Iskyros, and identified that we must have been looking at the Improperia, an ancient prayer usually prayed on Good Friday, in which it's alternated between Latin and Greek, and God is referred to as Hagios, holy, no surprises there, Iskyros, strong, and Athanatos, immortal. And the fact that the Theatre of Blood was written around that time of year and launched about a month and a half later, and we got those words into it, player worked out that we must have had some kind of influence.
You see, if I had seen that, I'd have assumed it was a Beatles reference in some obscure Latin sort of Latin. I don't know why the Beatles. I was going to go for that, the Rolling Stones.
Well, they're bugs, right? So they're like Beatles.
That's exactly what I meant there. Thank you for picking up on my latent wisdom there. And I've got a couple of sort of oddities that questions that obviously aren't really ever answered on stream. They're not controversial as such. I just guess they're not the topic of directly affecting the player within the game, etc. for Q&As, or nothing from 1999 to 2005 when you do the look backs. But I guess the first is, it's a question that maybe is changing slowly or is less visible, but there's this big division, I guess, between RS3 and OSRS players still, and seemingly a lot of it's now just out of spite and stubbornness. What sort of, I'm guessing that there really isn't that, I'm sure, between the teams, because I've met numerous mods while living in Cambridge from both games. Mohawk is a friend of mine, yourself, Kieran as well, I've met, and Orion, I can never say his name. Orion.
There is a mod Orion.
Yes, I'm going to go with that one because I kept calling him Oreo the first time I met him for a week and a half, and he was a bit absurdly. Wow. You know when you think you've got a word and then you say it and you realize it's a word, but not the word you were going for.
Yes. It happened to a girl at my school who was meant to be referring to King Canute, and the word she said was.
I mean, that does sound like a porn star's name, if ever there was one. Again,
well, in the case of Orion, that's a race of aliens in Star Trek who are painted green and generally don't wear a lot of clothes. So I'm not sure what mod Orion's going for there, but all the best to them.
I thought it was something to do with the Orion's belt, maybe.
That's also possible.
I'm quite surprised that I realised that that was a thing. But there's obviously this division, and there's not really much that can be combated on the Jagex side, understandably, because they're two separate sort of fiscal entities nowadays, I guess.
Funnily enough, they're not. See, membership
Oh,
of one comes with membership of the other, and there is no distinction. If you have membership, you're a member on whichever game you're logged into. And going back to 2013, when Old School first turned up, the talk was you can play Old School for no extra cost on top of your RS3 access. And of course, we found ourselves a lot of players who didn't care about their RS3 access suddenly. They want to play Old School. And they were a bit worried that Jagex would suddenly say it's $2 a month on top of your membership to play the Old School version, because your membership gets you RS3. If you want Old School as well, you've got to pay a little extra. Now, it's very clear that players weren't going to like that approach. And we never did it. We never have done it. I don't think we're ever going to do it, because why would we? Especially now the communities really are as diverged as you describe. But frankly, we never had the billing system rewritten to be able to treat the membership differently. So even if we wanted to do different prices that way, we'd have to first get the billing system written. Ain't nobody got time for that.
No.
Thus, it will probably stay as it is, at least for the foreseeable. And even if it changed, I can't imagine what it would change to. But talking community separation, I do think there's a lot of meme responses, things people say because it's funny and everyone says it, or go play RS3 is a famous insult among old school players, and one assumes that RS3 has their matching ones. I myself slightly fell foul of this while trying to refer to RS3 as the pretty version of the game and also the shiny version of the game. And while trying to say both of these words at once, I accidentally said, which was not quite where I was trying to go with this. Anyway, no hard feelings, hopefully.
No, definitely not. But I think the fiscal thing, I think is my argument would be for that. And I know that technically and physically they're not two different entities, but I assume there's not a huge amount of crossover between players. So,
sense, I believe.
Yeah. So the players almost make that own financial separation because they only play RS3 or only play. But then again, you're paying for membership for both. So in essence,
you pay for membership. Mostly people only use it on one version of the game. You get some additional crossover when RS3 does a double XP weekend. A lot of old school players pop over there to get their games, and then they pop back again. We do have some things that have been tried over the years to affect how the rivalry manifests. Like, one thing we don't need is we run an RS3 stream and the chat's full of old school players saying if it's the wrong game and should go away. That's not how politely they put it.
No.
And one way that was addressed was to split the two channels on Twitch so that old school players generally wouldn't be in the RS3 chat in the first place. That was tried, and then there was some talk of maybe we should merge them again. There was a community manager who wanted to merge them because he reckoned that he had a way of doing it where it wasn't going to lead to that kind of aggro. I don't think it worked out for him. He's not with us anymore. So,
no.
Anywho.
I guess why would you need to, though, in that sense?
Like, the two games are very distinct, and if players want to play both, fair play to them, and we're delighted they don't have to pay any extra for doing that at the moment, I suppose. But I see no reason to try and make them play nicely together.
Well, there's no up point, is there, really? Because the only thing that would bring would be adversity and exposure for new players of one of the games to maybe see the other one. But if you're playing one, you will know about the other one through either the game or just through the namesake.
We have little interest in advertising our product to our own customers who are paying it for the exact same price. But there are things that have forced players apart that are our fault in a way. Take, for example, the fact that you can't log into both games at once.
Yeah.
Do have players, probably a significant number, who'd like to be able to do that. It will take a fair bit of rewriting of login systems and chat systems to let them do that. We haven't had a chance so far, I'm afraid, because
And I guess
things need doing.
of
If we
course,
could do that, it might actually bring the community closer together again.
I guess there isn't a demand for that though either, in a sense of not of bringing the community closer, because actually that would be amazing. And I've been one of the advocates for, you know, if you don't enjoy one of the games, then just don't play it. You don't need to then go and, you know, hassle other players who play the other game. It's a pointless endeavor in my opinion. But
How dare you have fun on the internet? Wrong.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, try stopping a charging ball, I guess, at that point. But
being able to play both at once is a genuine request.
oh, okay.
It's been coming up since we began, in fact. Unfortunately, it's rather like being on two game worlds at the same time. They're that closely integrated in the infrastructure that it's, even though they're different versions of the game, you still can't be in more than one at a time. I regret this. I think it would be good if we could let you play both at once, partly because, well, as players think it would be fun, so they're the win. I don't really see a drawback.
I guess the only drawback would be the community of people who maybe would just, again, be irate for the sake of being irate rather than, you know, anything else. Oh, you've let me play the second game while I play the first game. How could you? I don't have to, but I'm annoyed.
Well, given that RuneScape in either version is sometimes described as the game you can play while you play something else, or the game you can play while you're watching Netflix or YouTube or watching a streamer, having them playing our other game instead of watching TV shows or a streamer is a slight improvement, because that keeps all in the family, a nice incestuous mush of their activities.
The new tagline has been found. RuneScape, the incestuous molding of activities. I think it would, I definitely wouldn't see a downside to it. Of course, any change you make as a company, there will be a group of people who see a downside to. So I guess that will happen.
The question might be what we were not doing because we was putting the tech resources onto doing this. Things people want from that department. This one, you know, it might turn out not to be the best one to pursue. But of course, you get 10 players, you get 10 priorities usually.
Yeah, exactly. That's sort of a positive and negative, I think, of a game such as RuneScape, with the longevity it has and the amount of skill sort of range there can be within the game, and you're sort of having fun at every level of that. That the demand is such and the diversity is such that the demand is always going to be not what quite a large group of players probably wanted at one time. But you know, it's hence the voting system, I guess, hence why 75% of people say yes to it. That comes in. The 25% who said no, but there'll be another update and poll at some point where they will say yes. So
hope so.
yeah, exactly. So I guess that kind of brings me on to my next point, which was the changes in the community. So I was thinking specifically myself about the Twitch community around RuneScape, because I've been around that for too long now, actually 9 years, I want to say, pretty much since pre-EOC. No, not pre-EOC. It would have been pre-EOC actually. Yeah, pre-OC, around, I guess, around the height of the Rune Shark days, as I like to remember it. So yeah, 2011, 2012. And back then, obviously, I guess this could also be said, the platform itself of Twitch has changed, hence why the RuneScape category has changed. But did you ever see the huge swing from what was actually majoritively RS3 streamers, pretty much, I would say, up until about 2015, to this huge old school swing where there is, you know, tens of times the amount of old school streamers as RuneScape streamers? And I guess in a wider question, did you guys see the popularity of this game, this old school version of the game? I know you've answered it somewhat on the Q&A streams, but I guess you personally, what was your reaction to the big rise and continuation of that rise?
So we were naturally very pleased to find, oh, we've got the old school version of the game in the market, and suddenly lots of customers. There was some concern that, customers moving from RS3 over to old school, that's not growth as such, because that's the same customer for the same price. In fact, arguably, it could be considered less money, because in RS3 they might have bought things off Solomon's store. In old school they can't do that. So naturally the old school team were delighted, all like 4 or 5 of us. And since the players coming into old school seemed to, a lot of them stayed in old school, and it became a vibrant community that was stable and growing, rather than a quick flash in the pan for the nostalgia hit and then go away again 2 months later. I think the company was pretty darn happy too. I don't actually talk to people at the top end of the company very much. I mean, I spoke to MMG at parties occasionally, and he'd always say nice things. Frankly, he was generally quite jovial at parties anyway. So that
I actually met him at the local, which I won't mention the name of if this does go out, obviously, but the local pub to where I was and where the office was for you guys. And I remember thinking exactly the same thing. And it was always that moment of, I think I met him 3 or 4 times probably when I was with Simon, who was the analyst. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if he's still down there or not.
He's still there. In fact, I've almost never been in that pub without running into him.
Yeah, I had the same experience actually. Lovely guy though. He told me a very long story once about, I can't remember much of it, but I think Slovenia or Czechoslovakia, which he says he can remember about 20% of, and the other 80% of he remembers via the injuries he got while drinking, which was quite an interesting story. Anyway, slight deviation. But obviously MMG has this, I don't know the best way of describing it, but lasting reputation within the industry as a whole. Not to say he's a bad man or a good man, not to say anything particularly about him as a person. But yeah, you're right. He was very, I don't want to say false because I don't think it was false, but he was very optimistic to the point where you were almost less convinced about what he was trying to tell you by the time he'd finished telling you it.
He had a vision, and he was, I think, very talented at getting people to buy into his vision. Not just employees, but I gather venture capitalists. And that's kind of what you want from somebody who keeps starting his own firms. It's a talent, all right. I know people who, people I knew at university would have loved to have that aptitude, because hang around the university, you get people who are thinking, maybe I've got a cool idea and I could make a startup when I graduate. And MMG's ability to get people to invest in his ideas is rather marketable talent. Of course, sometimes his visions for RuneScape may not have quite aligned with what the players would have wanted for RuneScape, but he didn't tend to get in. I never experienced him getting in my way as a design thing. If I just either wasn't working on that kind of content, or he genuinely didn't get in the way. My view of him is, whatever the benefits and drawbacks of working under him, my career did very nicely under him, and for that I am grateful, and I wish him all the very best wherever he is.
Well, definitely. I mean, from last I
there's a lot of people that I like and care about, so as employees, so I wish them all the best too.
I mean, he definitely, from what I remember of the time he was there, obviously I've never sound like I worked there, but from playing the game at least, it wasn't, there was obviously some interesting decisions for RS3, and I think the Squeal of Fortune might have been under him, which was people didn't like, but people also now love their cosmetics, so who knows. But he definitely did keep the company. It's quite hard to say, because obviously you never know if it would have stayed as afloat as it did at that time. But with the changes that were being made after EOC, maybe he did keep the company afloat in a way that it might not have been.
bear in mind that at that time, Jagex was working very hard on a Transformers game. This was no secret. And I think the decision to pursue that opportunity was one that he led. One can understand where he'd get it from. After all, Transformers was a whopping great big franchise with Michael Bay movies coming out like the clappers, and Hasbro's marketing budgets is presumably quite large.
I'd assume so.
And if you've got a studio that's got one MMO, you've presumably got the technology to have two MMOs. And if you can get Hasbro to market your second one, it seems reasonable to me that it would be worth a shot.
Yeah.
Now, the decision to have quite a lot of staff working on it, that's a lot of salaries for however many years before the game comes to market. Obviously, you've got to invest if you want to get anything, sure. But maybe having all of those people geared up before it got as far as a public beta might have been a very heavy drain on the studio's finances. This isn't a secret, by the way. If one looks in Company's House, you can see the...
well, I actually remember these conversations happening with you, I believe. Well, no, maybe it wasn't with you. Possibly it was with someone at the local, as well as I think you guys did actually talk about it at Runefest, as well as on a couple of the streams. I want to say back in the day on the not the RS3 streams, the newsletters. There was a lot of there was definitely nothing kept private at that point about that.
Well, company finances become public records, so there's indeed players would write in to tell me on the forums what they thought of it and why they thought we should be spending it differently. So that was clearly no secret. My view is, if it had worked out, if they had a good enough design to get to market, MMG would have looked like a genius, because he'd put a lot of eggs in the basket and it would have become the ultimate fuyang, or omelette, or what you will, with eggs. As it is, it didn't work out. And, well, here's hoping that whoever invests in his next one, it'll work out better. And of course, same goes for all my former colleagues who went to work for him, Modris L, Modano, etc.
Because because I had a look actually at their card game. I can't remember the name. Not Paladins, was it? It was Lightseekers, yes. Really, actually, very fun. It's a very, very good concept, and I'm glad that his company's doing well. I almost just reminiscing on a personal level for a second here, as I am known to do. I am. I can imagine myself in a rocking chair somewhere, just with a banjo, reminiscing about my my 2016 and 15 exploits. If I can't even remember half of them, but it was always very warming to see the Jagex moderators, because for a bit of context, for again, if this goes out at any point, I lived in Cambridge for about 11 months total in 2015 to 2016, and was a heavy alcoholic at the time, which was it was an interesting part of my life, but definitely nothing I would change. The lessons you learn and all of that. But everyone was so warming. Everyone was so warm and sort of welcoming, even if I was a handful to be around. And there was a feeling that I've never felt anywhere else around the people who work for that company, for Jagex. That company, like, you don't work there. I said that in such a way that I was almost trying to describe to you your own company. That didn't work.
Oh, given that I am known to like chatting about the game and the studio, indeed, I seem willing to do it now. The idea of doing it in that pub with whoever's there never seemed so alien to me. Although if I'd realised what you were going through, I maybe wouldn't have encouraged you to drink so much, and I'm sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry at all. As I say, cheers with the water and the Lucasade. I definitely wouldn't have turned the corner I had without those experiences. So there's nothing but lessons learned there, and honestly, I wouldn't change it for the world, because I think I for that year, I had such identity crisis with what I was studying, I think, and it did then lead for me to realize that I want to go into production, but working hopefully for game studios as their stream person slash broadcaster, what Mod Spear does essentially. But I think I think that leads us nicely on to the next question. I remember you mentioning a couple of minutes ago about how people would come to you on the forums complaining about the way that Jagex spent their money. And my next question is, what's your I'm guessing it can't be easy on Twitter when everyone thinks that your job role encompasses absolutely every facet of every moment of every development process within the game.
Well, mostly, if I tell them quite straightforwardly, no, can't help you with that. Generally, they're cool with it, especially if I'm able to direct them to someone who maybe can help them. Like, there was a question the other day about, can we have a cape that's worn draping down the side of you rather than down the back of you? And it's like, I have no idea. Like, what's that going to do to the render order around the stuff that's normally on the side rather than the back? Ultimately, I could guess, but let's link this guy to where you can find some artists' Twitter channels and see if one of the character artists can answer this one. Because I don't know.
I mean, now you've got me thinking about it. I want to see that. It's quite a...
So you wear kind of around the side. I think Magneto in the X-Men movies, the earlier ones, he's got a cape that's distinctly lopsided. Given that the guy flies, so it doesn't matter too much what he wears.
Well, he has to watch out for profile turbines, I guess.
Yeah.
It reminds me of was it the Incredibles with the cape?
No cape.
No cape. That was, oh god, I now miss the Incredibles films. They're so good. So obviously you've got this huge within the community, at least, this huge fame within the game. I would say within the games industry, you're probably up there in terms of most followed game developer, game worker, etc. Maybe there's a few, Blizzard CEOs slash head designers who maybe have your beat there a bit of work to do on that one. But how is that? Because I know you well enough to know that you really do care about the community, about the game, to such an extent that you are up replying to messages out of work hours to sometimes early hours of the morning. I don't know how much that's changed now, but
rather depends on the time of year and what the sun's doing, to be honest. I don't sleep too well when the sun's up, and in the summer, then 4 in the morning, it starts getting annoyingly bright around these parts. But see, the job is meaningful to me because of the customers, the players with whom one can interact. If I were a programmer and told, program one of these by middle manager dude, and I program one of these, and the middle manager dude says, good boy, here's your next paycheck. Now write one of these. And I go away and do that. I think I'd get very bored. I mean, ultimately, a properly interesting mind doesn't do boredom, because they'll always find the interest in anything. But I would not be as engaged if there weren't players on the other end of it who felt real to me. Like, take the costume room rework.
You sure that's just water you're drinking? You sure that's just water you're drinking there, Ash? That's a...
Yeah, but proper hard water in this part of the country.
Oh yeah, I remember it well, or I don't remember it well, actually, to be honest.
Builds healthy bonds. Anyway, so I rewrote costume rooms in PLH, and that was very much a passion project. A lot of it done outside of official hours, technically. We get ideation time, and I use some of that too, obviously. But a lot of it was sort of unofficial up until it went into testing, and the QA staff actually had to put real working hours on it. And I did it because I wanted to make the thing better. I mean, I've used player and house costume rooms. They were good for 2006, considering what the dev was dealing with in those days. Kudos to Mod John A. He pulled off an impressive stunt for that technology. But with today's technology, I knew I could make a nice, more featured one. And it felt more meaningful because I could do it, and not just here's a technical achievement like, woo, I've constructed an interesting data structure and written some code that reads it, but because I could see players feeling it make a difference to their lives, well, their in-game lives. People saying this has just saved me 100 bank slots. You're welcome. And that was what I was aiming for. I'm glad you like it. That's where I get off. I mean, yeah, also they pay me. Chap's got a mortgage, chap's got a wife and stepkids. That's important too, because there's only so far you can stand on principle where you say, you know what, I don't care whether my wife and stepkids starve to death in a ditch. I'm going to do the Runescape thing.
I think your player reputation
I'm
might...
actually quite fond of Monica and the girls, and I don't want to make them go starve to death in the ditch so I can make a point. But
no, unless it's in game, of course. If you can create that into in-game content, then no, please don't actually. But I mean, I guess that could be another. Yeah, oh God, yeah. Again, that I do not want to be blamed for initiating an idea like that. Definitely. I would say though that looking at the history at the company, that I assume from what you've told me in the past, and obviously I think you did actually tell me some figures back in the day, but I won't say them now because I probably misremember them anyway. But I assume you started on principle, or on more of a principle than you are at now. Was it because I'm assuming that when it was a fledgling company, when you started, there was a lot of working for less than was desirable, and then kind of that build up. But I assume that love hasn't changed. You've kind of just taken that with you.
Well, it's there were other aspects. See, I was coming up to graduate. I realized I would be facing moving back in with my parents. I would have taken any job at all that would have let me, pay rent and carry on living in Cambridge with some friends in a shared house. Funny thing, it was the same house Andrew had lived in after he, sometime after he graduated, because he and two other guys rented this house together, and he moved out, and another one moved in, and the second one moved out, and another one moved in, and another one moved out to get married, and I moved in because I was in the same social group. It's how I met Andrew, through that social group, through the church choir, and that was the same rented house. And by the way, moving into a joint rental of a shared house when the others have been there 6 years, and some have come, some have gone, some come, some have gone, and you're the last one out at the end of 7 years, means suddenly you've got to be responsible for the damn inventory.
Oh, that okay. Oh, well, I mean, actually, I had exactly the same problem when I came back after leaving university. I came back for 2 days, and within those 2 days, I had to repair 2 walls. I had to kind of fill in holes on 2 walls, replace 2 curtain rails, a fridge plug, a door key, and I think a clothesline. But I think the clothesline might have been my fault, because while trying to replace the curtain rails, I took it through the back garden, got it hooked on the clothesline, which then ripped the clothesline off the side of the house, therefore creating more work for myself, which is very much the mantra of my life.
It wasn't that bad for us, but let's face it, I didn't see much of my deposit back, and I didn't really expect to, because whoever owned that place didn't get their house back as it had been 7 years earlier. I think they were a bit optimistic when they said bathroom contains net curtain, clean, lounge contains potted plant. Seriously? Who rents out one of those for 7 years?
No.
But they did also list on the inventory, cupboard under stairs contains bowl of cleaning materials. Now, why the hell would a bowl of cleaning materials still be there 7 years later? Surely someone would have used it by then. Actually, we hadn't. It was still there. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to move into that shared house. Our mate was getting married. They offered me the third bedroom. And I said, I better find a job then in Cambridge quickly. Because the wedding was coming in 6 months. My graduation was coming up in 7 months. I needed to be able to pay the rent for when I moved in. And Andrew suggested I apply for the support team. Now, I was doing a master's at the University of Cambridge. The customer support team wasn't the obvious career move, but firstly, I like Runescape. And sure, it wasn't going to be a prestigious thing answering customer queries, but I was pretty confident I'd enjoy it. I was a forum moderator after all, and spending a lot of my evenings modding the forums. I think I got a good grasp of support needs for this studio. And I also figured it's a small studio, growing, chance of field promotion if you're in there as the company grows. Slightly calculated thing, but yeah, basically I was willing to take a lousy salary, and it was a lousy salary, to get into Jagex, to be able to stay in Cambridge. And I figured a year in, if I've got good prospects of getting into another department, I'll stick around. And if it's looking like I'll still be in answering customer queries for years, maybe I'll just use the fact that I'm in Cambridge to job hunt for a different role somewhere else. As it happens, I got moved to QA 2.5 months later, which was very lucky. Well, sort of lucky. In fact, a guy kind of got fired for gross misconduct, and apparently it was really gross misconduct.
Yeah, I think I know this one. Messages that shouldn't have been sent by a professional.
Well, not a professional customer support. Well, not a professional in this industry. I think if you're a professional in that industry,
yes,
according to fans.
You said it, not me. Well, to be fair, actually, it's on a I think it's on a Canello. I can never say his name. History of he did a whole internship video about the strange internship program that Jagex had of hiring certain interns and the bugs that came from that. And there was a whole
yes.
gross and actually you were mentioning that about how you were one of the few people who would choose to be on call 24/7 in the early days. Well, and now I guess, to be fair.
Oh, I don't do the on call, not these days.
Well, you had one quite recently though.
Ooh, actually, I stepped down from being on call in 2011.
Oh, was there not something you had to go in for? Was that the duping thing that was a year or two ago you had to go in for at midnight?
No, but I did have to go in for a barbarian assault infinite 3 points in 2015.
I tell you what, the last 5 or 6 years of old school RuneScape time just feels like 4 months of the real world. So I've got no idea.
It's not like I'm usually doing anything in the middle of the night that can't be, interrupted and done later.
Like sleep.
I function reasonably well on low sleep for a little while, and if the game's in trouble, then generally speaking, I'm not doing anything more interesting than solving it. But these days we have younger people on call, people who, let's face it, I did my nearly 5 years of being on call. I do feel that the torch can very happily be passed to Mods, Kieran, Edge, Lenny, Rock in future. People who...
Does Rock know this, or have you just put him up for it?
No, that's something that I think that's something we're working towards.
That's a conversation for next week.
I haven't seen him in a while, but he was keen on it last time I spoke to him about it. No, that's a younger man's game. I've been there, done that. The overtime was appreciated when I was younger and trying to put together a deposit for a house. Now I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I guess with the one positive of COVID, I guess could be, I don't know if they're actually looking at this as a company or not, but remote working could actually replace having to go into the office to do a bar, obviously some very major hot fixes that need in-person people, but sort of the odd cold fix slash.
No, you're right though. Since last March, when COVID kicked off for us, we've been operating the game pretty much from outside the office. There's very little. All the major kinds of catastrophe we can have, we've had and dealt with from outside the office. We've done big, scary updates. We've done little updates. We've done hot fixes. We've done emergency catastrophic rollbacks. The office isn't the place it used to be. I miss my desk. It's got some of my stuff on it, but the people who are on call don't have to go very far for it. And frankly, they already had remote access. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, me going into the office was actually more of a dinosaur relic thing, because I was one of the few staff who didn't have remote access. Never really wanted remote access. I like the work-life separation. COVID, of course, buggered all that. So fine, I've got my workstation in my house now. I miss my kitchen table now, but it's worth it. And it's growing on me.
I think that leads very nicely into the sort of next little bit I've got, which is pre-lockdown, obviously. Into lockdown was the first couple of months that I can imagine were smoother than expected, but still rocky. And then lockdown itself, with the changes you've just mentioned of, you know, missing the office, working from home, remote access and remote working, and the advantages of that as well, of proving to, I guess, yourself, the community, as well as learning from what can be done from home, where there hasn't been a necessity to even try doing something like that from home before. You know, the sort of you don't, until you need to do something, you don't really try it. Not you, but personally, I'm not saying as a I just mean, you know, as humans. What do you see then once we leave this new world of anarchy but out of the window scenario? Do you see changes happening to the way that development happens? I mean, I assume probably not in terms of the you know, the steps that you go through in a technical sense, because that hasn't changed since 2004, so why would it?
There's a few things that will stay different. Take, for example, Zoom calls. When we launch a game update these days, all the critical personnel involved in it, you know, dev what wrote it, the uploader who's overseeing the process, a couple of tech people from the sysadmins, etc., they'll all be in a Zoom call together, monitoring in real time, in constant conversation with each other. Now, this is something that we started doing because we were working from home, and we're going to keep it. I mean, God knows what it'd be like in an actual office with other people sitting at the next desk, by the way, but call centers exist, so it must be solvable, maybe with better partitions. But we find this invaluable. We can't imagine living without it. And one example where this would have been helpful before is the Twisted Bow fiasco.
That was where it dropped. Was that the max cash dropping?
Oh no, that was a previous one.
Okay.
In 2019, somebody mapped out a Twisted Bow spawn next to Farming Guild.
Oh yeah, no, I do remember this. Yep.
I bet you do.
I never used it. I just woke up. I think I woke up, and I think the Americans had started with it, hadn't they? And then, it started very early in the morning or something. And at that point, I was sleeping until 11 or 12 o'clock, like the degenerate I am. So I remember waking up and seeing the stories.
It was about 11:30 when we launched that update. So yeah, it would have been about then. Anywho, that if we'd had the relevant stakeholders all in one Zoom call together, would have been a lot easier to deal with. However, we were in a building together. It's not the same because it's quite a big building. So we've got one producer saying, well, before we can decide whether to roll back or not to roll back, we must gather data on the impact of it. That will help us make the right decision. So he'd go and talk to people who can do data analysis and get estimate from them of what they can tell us and when they can tell us it. 15 minutes goes by while he walks over to their part of the office, has conversations and walks back. Then has to tell all of us what it was he found. We say, well, that's no bloody use. We should do a rollback. And then, well, when we do a rollback, it messes up bombs because it does. Players complain about that a fair bit. Got to talk to the support team about the impact on them. So walk around to another part of the office, have another conversation, come back, tell everybody what he's learned. Still not happy about it. A couple of developers who would have fairly strong views that we should be doing a rollback at this point are unfortunately not in the office at all. They've gone to KFC. And they're people I'd have really, really liked at my side while I'm debating with the producers whether we should roll back or not. And they're not. They're in KFC. They can send me the occasional text message saying they think we really should, but it's not quite the same as having their clads alongside me. In the end, I think it was Mod Connor, his name was, agreed. All things considered, yes, turn the game off and do a rollback, Ash. So I run back to my desk and, okay, so I'm about to press a button that will turn the game off. And suddenly he says, Ash, wait. I pressed the enter key and I said, sorry, Connor, too late. He's left the country now, I'm sure he won't mind.
Was this our mutual friend Connor from Irish Connor, by any chance?
He was Irish. I didn't know you knew him.
Went back to be a bouncer by any chance? Was that the same one?
I don't think he was a bouncer. If he
used
went
to go to the
studio.
I used to go to the local with us, younger dudes. Was that Connor? It might not have been Connor. It might have been Dan.
Oh, him. No, he wasn't a producer.
Oh no! As I said that, I did think, hang on, no, he didn't have that job role. Anyway, sorry. You look like a Connor.
Well, Jagex has always had a lot of Connors.
Well, Merchant was a Connor.
Indeed, spelt different.
Oh yeah, he had the strange spelling that dyslexics would hate. I could never spell his name. I tried when I used to play Chronicle. Me and him did a pre-tournament kind of like this pre-tournament talk, and I was trying to spell his name in the OBS overlay, and I thought it was the original spelling as in CONNOR, and I even misspelt that. So I misspelt the spelling that's the easier one to spell to such an extent where he looked at it and said, "Who is this Kunar?" And I went, "No, that's supposed to be your name. Sorry about that." God, I miss Chronicle. Sorry.
We have many Connors.
Yeah, back to the original point, yeah.
But that would have been easier if we'd all been in a Zoom call, see? Because all the people who needed to talk to each other about it would have been in a Zoom call together, talking in real time. No, wait for a producer to walk halfway around the building and back. And I think it would have worked better. So, no, when we go back to the office, whenever that may be, we're going to keep having these Zoom calls or some kind of call, a conference call in which the game update is being monitored. We should have thought of it previously, but having people on a voice chat in the open plan office didn't seem like an obvious idea at the time.
No, it's the sort of the necessity brings around new angles to look at a certain situation. And I mean, I guess it would be great for people like Aiza and I think G as well. She travels quite a way, doesn't she? Or she did. I don't know if she actually ended up moving down. Fair enough. But I'm assuming that they can remote work a little bit more as well, because he's got a hell of a journey, isn't he? Aiza's 3 hours each way or something like that.
Yeah, that would be about it. I have no idea where he lives at the moment, frankly, because it's suddenly become immaterial. There's a young dev I was working with, and I kept having to remind myself, the person I'm talking to is in Sweden. And there's a time zone difference, so I should probably leave him alone, because it's 8 o'clock here, and I'm getting hungry, and it's 9 o'clock there, so he must be really hungry. These things are, it's like all the lines are blurred. At one point, I was having a discussion with a guy in Holland, a guy in Texas, a guy in Manchester, and me in Cambridge. And none of us really even needed to care where the others were, other than the guy in Texas might be sleeping.
Well, I assume as well for I can't remember his job title or his mod name, but your new American he's not a CMO, is he? He's not actually that new. He's about 6 months in, but he was on the leader the leader streams.
Might that be Mod Mike D?
Yes, Mod Mike. There we go. I knew it was there somewhere.
Hmm.
But because he was telling the story about how he basically went back for what he assumed would be a couple of days to get some stuff and sort of see his family, and it's been there for nearly a year, which is, well, not a year, but 9 months.
A rather good idea too, considering. I mean, apart from the time zone difference,
And their COVID levels.
well, at the very least, he would not. If you're gonna spend lockdown somewhere, spending it in the same place as your family might have its perks.
I don't know. I've never met his family. It could be something totally different. No,
I haven't either, but I certainly wish Monica were here.
Oh, because of course because she's, I'm assuming, back in America.
Oh,
Oh God, that was, yeah. Because I remember I can't remember if it was when you like got engaged or something similar. We were talking about this because it was around the time I was actually
yeah, you didn't have those at that point.
yeah, and it was you were talking about going over there and just the excitement of for you and how excited you were to do it. It was great because I think it was the first time we hadn't talked about either Egyptian gods or the game.
Mm-hmm.
And you were really motivated, and I'm sorry that you guys, obviously, COVID has happened, but it's one of those things, I guess.
A lot worse. There's not a lot of it in the bit of Florida where she is.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Well, America's a bit of a mind my language, a bit of a shit show under previous administration.
It's got its worst bits and its better bits for COVID numbers. As far as I can tell, the random suburb where Monica's based is doing okay certainly compared to the Midwest, where there's a lot more.
Yeah, I've got a few friends in Austin who are saying that it's just absurd how many cases there are.
Yeah.
And, well, I mean, even in Austin, it's not as bad as Houston or the other one. My memory for names, Houston or Phoenix?
El Paso? Phoenix is Arizona. I don't know what the numbers are like there.
Yeah, I didn't mean Phoenix. I think I did mean El Paso. Yeah. So here's this question is completely unrelated to anything, but it's something that's been bugging me for a couple of months, and I haven't known how to phrase it or even who to talk to. When you fill the game map up, do you start going laterally, or could you start going laterally? Because I'd love to see sky islands or, charter sky ships, what they're called, blimps.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot further laterally we could go. Zaya, for example, we went a very long way west for that. There's several blank chunks of ocean between it and the mainland, although it's fairly close to, say, Pirates Cove and Moon Isle. But we went a long way west for that. And we could go, well, the entire width of Zaya further west without running out of space. But we don't want to. Because there's nothing south of it. We've got some plans for what will be south of it. We've been teasing the Kingdom of Varlamore, which has references in the Fourth Lost Dungeon and a few books in the Myths Guild, etc. We've been teasing towards that. The artists have some themes in mind for what it'll be like. I think Savannah kind of terrain was mentioned. That's Savannah as in the kind of wilderness type rather than Georgia.
I was going to say that would be an interesting take.
Well, I've only seen Savannah, Georgia from an airplane that was somewhere above it and probably not over the city anyway, but I have no idea what it looked like down there.
I mean, it's Georgia, so I'd assume very similar to the general geological description of what Savannah is anyway, or geographical.
Yeah, I mean, if I ever have to change planes in Atlanta in the future, I'll get to see a bit of Georgia at last from the inside of one airport, which probably isn't representative.
You know, binoculars and a big window, you could see quite a lot.
I mean, when I went to when I was changing planes in Charlotte, North Carolina, I thought it'd be a rather nice touch to go outside and stand in the car park for a few minutes and have a look at the scenery. Because oh my god, I'm in another state. I don't get much.
There's a YouTube vlog you could do, is just travel around America and visit different car parks of different airports, and that could be what it is. Every state you see a different car park.
Oh, seriously, I spent the whole night walking around the car park in Boston's Logan Airport, I think it was. I'd got a 7.5 hour layover between midnight and 7 the next morning, and spent it mooching around the car park in the rain for want of anything else to do. At least I found a Dunkin' Donuts.
You've just made me hungry now. People. So yeah, I think I used the wrong word when I said laterally. Did I mean longitudinally? Up is what I meant. So you've got cave systems, you've got different levels down.
I see what you mean. Yes.
It didn't really work, but it's what I was aiming for. So could you go up?
Not very much further, because the space that's up has already a lot of it being used by various dungeons. Take, for example, the Abyss, the one you go to via the Dark Mage in the low-level wilderness. That is mapped some distance north of the standard terrain we use, and it was originally defined as being wilderness within that zone, which led to a rather embarrassing bug on launch day. Andrew Gower had to be called out for that one, because he was the only person with any kind of hotfix or coldfix access, so he had to get the call out himself. He wasn't pleased. That's when he started delegating more, I think. But yeah, it was just not so far north that the people who first wrote the wilderness wouldn't have included it in their zone definitions of what the wilderness would be. The terrain as you see it on the surface, if you were to go 100 map squares north of that, you'd get the place where we map the dungeons that are nominally under it. So Lumbridge Castle is in one map square. 100 map squares north is Lumbridge Castle Cellar. And our convention is send the player 100 map squares north. That takes them down to the underground, and vice versa.
So it's on the same plane as...
Yeah.
So you'd have to find a different plane to put something on top of that 100 map squares north.
Well, you wouldn't have to, really, because if you... provided the two never meet, the fact that this chunk and this chunk are described as being like this in a way that the player can never actually see has no significance.
Oh, so it's just an instance, essentially. Or not an instance, or yes, an instance, I guess.
It's just a very, very long way away, and we can take you that distance when you go up and down the ladder in the kitchen.
Oh, I see.
And we say you've gone up to the surface or down to the basement. What you've actually done is travel 6,400 tiles northwards or southwards. But hey, it's all the same to the player.
Who needs a Camelot teleport when you can do that? So in terms of game space, then I guess, as you say, there is some original description of longitudinal left, but there's no point doing that because you can't replicate that the other way.
Well, we just choose not to do it because the map's already quite long and stretched, and it would maybe look better if we filled it out as a square rather than making an incredibly long, narrow letterbox.
But what would happen then when you hit that inevitable limit? Would you have to then be like, right now we have to update the systems that map the game, or would you just be like, okay, we'll just remove and add?
Well, more likely we just go in another direction. And if we wanted to pretend that it was actually west of Zayon, well, we can make our map surface render that way, even though that's not where the terrain would really be. Because we can, it's like cobbling the thing together like a Frankenstein's monster in the thing maps.
So you just replicate Lumbridge Cellar somewhere in there.
Well, I mean that if we mapped an island and said, this is a long way west of Zaire, but we couldn't actually put it there. We could still make the map draw itself as though it were there.
Oh, I see. So, oh, okay. So actually, technically, there isn't really a limit space-wise.
Take the London Underground. You know, the maps of the London Underground show nice straight lines with stations on them. That's not how London's laid out. But from the point of view of somebody sitting in the tube, it may as well be. And that's very much like what the game map is doing. We may have continuous terrain that resembles the map, or we may not. But if you can't tell, what's the difference?
If you get to point B from point A, what's the the only time in life where the journey is not the most important part? It's the destination is in this case.
And there's other ways you can get around it, like you mentioned, blimps, etc. Well, supposing you were traveling via a ship or an airship or a gnome copter to some other land. That land doesn't even have to be mapped anywhere at all. It can just be such a long way away it doesn't show on the map. Rather like what's done to Brain Death Island, I think. That's not connected to the main surface map. There's no reason why not. It could have been. The developer at the time wants it to be, the only way you can get there is if you're already drunk or something. So Piety Pete mugs you with a bottle and transports you there when you're not looking. It's very funny the first few times. After that, maybe it could have been done with streamlining.
Also, a strange comment on, don't talk to strangers, I guess. Well, by that point, I guess he's not a stranger.
He's strange, but the idea of being press ganged into and finding yourself on a ship when you sober up is not unique to our fantasy. Anywho, that island, with the distillery and the long walk to the stagnant water source in the north, that isn't on the main surface map at all, but it could have been.
Oh, so the surface map isn't technically the only map. I don't think that was something I knew.
Well, the surface map is the bit of the game space that we call the surface map and that we draw pictures of whenever anyone asks for a copy of it. Brain Death Island is not on there. But if we wanted to copy and paste to make it pretend that it were there, that would work. And from the point of view of someone doing Rum Deal, they'd never know the difference because you get hit by a pirate with a bottle and teleported somewhere. Who are you to say whether it's in the sea or not in the sea or some fake sea? Actually, one difference would be that when you're on the damn island, you can't see the edge of the sea because when they put it out there in its own little space, you didn't map that much sea around it. So that would be different. You can see the edge at the moment.
Well, especially on the Rune Light client with the infinite zoom, you could, yeah.
I don't think you even need the Rune Light client, the infinite zoom. It's just very obviously the sea stops here.
It is amazing though when you think about how, well, obviously I'm sure you've working with the engine as you have for so many years now. It's amazing how much further ahead it was at the start of its life cycle, and for a fair amount of time after that, and how it's still actually you're still making innovation with that engine that other games, even with these newer engines, wouldn't be able to do. I.e., for me personally, I think it's probably the highest skill ceiling MMO in existence. I mean, if you look at the raids and the mechanics compared to say WoW, yeah, in WoW you can learn the raids and mechanics, and it does take some trial and error to do. But once you've got it down, it's about beating it quickly. And you once you've got it, you're not really going to die if you've got a good enough team. But Nightmare of Ashihama, or not Nightmare of Ashihama, sorry, Fitra Blood, or Cox, not so much now, but yeah, that came out. But there is still a big chance of you dying, and you need to be at a certain level to even a skill level to even consider doing it. Then you've got PKing, then you've got even the wilderness bosses without the safe spots. Obviously, there's mechanics to make it so much easier. And then one tick skilling, or sort of these mechanics that no other game even has, because of the style of engine that it uses, and the age of the engine means you can kind of, there's an infinite amount of tricks that can be learnt without breaking the rules to speed up your gameplay. Would you agree that it's probably up there for the highest skill cap of a game? And why do you think players have invested that much time and energy into finding that?
I believe if one were to put a challenge on the internet, there are people who will feel very motivated to master it, which is a great thing. And RuneScape attracts a very technically minded kind of player, I think. I think we see people mentioning that they're now studying computing because when they were younger they were playing RuneScape, and that works. In fact, we've hired quite a lot of developers who were younger playing RuneScape, grew up to do computing at uni, and now work for us on RuneScape. Kieran, for example. With this very technically minded approach, very analytical, there's a lot of people who are out there to optimize their games, work out every possible thing that can shave off the time, work out what the underlying mechanism is doing, work out how to therefore use it for optimal results. And this is highly engaging stuff. It's one of the reasons we chose not to publish certain formulae, because we just like watching them do it, and we hate to take it away from them by posting the answers straight off. Now, it's not so much fun with loot tables. Yeah, they can, gather big data and work out loot tables to identify what the denominator must have been, etc. That probably isn't the fun bit, but working out what the mechanics are doing and seeing if they can get something better from it, I totally get the appeal.
I think, yeah, I do definitely agree with that. And I also would say that because of the natural aging of the community, because I mean, in any other game, my age of 26, I would be considered a slightly older player than the average player base. But with old school, I mean, I'm right in there with, I would assume with your metrics, which is sort of 21 through, well, probably 18 through 35, something like that.
Honestly, we don't know.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, because you don't ask.
We've run surveys asked. We can guess to what extent the answers are accurate. Who knows? It would be nice to know more. We've, I think, occasionally used external consulting firms to see if they can work out what our demographic is. Frankly, it probably is what you describe. It seems reasonable if it would be. Looking at Twitter will do breakdowns of who's following you and what they're into. That can be quite interesting. Tells me the rough gender balance of the people following me on social media. And how it compares against my colleagues is really interesting, though I don't see much of that anymore because we can't just look at each other's screens so much like we used to. So if you're sending somebody information, it's a much more manual process rather than, yo, dude, what have you got for this?
Well, you've got something to brag about when you get back, because you've well surpassed a lot of the other colleagues that you have. But I think obviously it's interesting how I mean I know why the community have kind of taken this love for you, because you're so open about your thoughts on everything, and you're just a genuinely really sort of approachable person. And also you never switch off on Twitter, it seems, or you didn't. I mean, somewhat now, but even so.
I don't post a lot of new content, but I've carried on engaging plenty with what people want to send my way. And that's partly because I haven't had very interesting projects that would be worth showing. I love showing, here's what I'm working on, here's an infographic of how it all fits together and what it's going to do when you can expect it. I love doing that. Been a while since I had such a project. Let's face it, what do I have most of this year? the death update.
Yeah, that's.
I did actually put out previews of some of that, showing, here's the items kept on death screen and how to get info out of it. Here's the Angel of Death gravestone back again. I was very glad to get that back because I'd had so much fun writing it in 2007. Ye frail mortals who gaze upon this sight, forget ye not the fate of insert name here, once mighty, now surrendered to the inescapable grasp of mortal destiny. Requiescat in pace.
That will be a lot of people's ringtones after this, just to clarify.
Check out the insert name here. But a big shout out to Kevin, whoever that may be.
There's a bloke called Kevin. If it ever goes public, framed will be loving you right now, actually, because he's the only Kevin I can think of.
Okay. I never. It always seems rude to ask what some of their actual names are when talking to.
The only reason I know it is because of Twitch streams. I think that's the kind of the crossover.
He did ask me once, also the other day on Twitter, why are you called Ash? Okay.
You should have gone down the whole sort of the biblical route. I think that would have been an answer he would have appreciated.
I blame my mum.
It's always so interesting to hear, for me, as well as I'm sure so many other people, how, because the game is almost a complete anomaly in how it performs and how long it's been around and how the community engages and actually how close the community are. Because we, talking from Twitch again, from my experiences there, that we were the only community really still pretty much the only community that were interconnecting between each other. So there was one point between 2013 and 14 where I think every streamer pretty much knew every other streamer, however big or small. Bar Boaty, who knew a million more people than anyone else, and somehow I don't know how Ginger got so successful, but it's a question of him, I guess. But that was the question I was going to ask about. I don't really know how to phrase this without making it sound like. I'm just going to say it how I was thinking it. Streamers obviously do influence content updates in some degree in terms of raising, not in terms of the actual update or in terms of asking you to update something, but raising the visibility of certain issues here and there. What would you say to my wording is going to be so bad here. What would you say to the content creators for the game who have kind of really pushed the boundaries, I guess, of what there shouldn't be this much popularity in a logical sense for a 2007 styled graphical click and point game, and yet there's been this, Twitch, it's top 10 all of the time.
Well, who are we to tell them they're having fun? Wrong. Besides, RuneScape always was that sort of self-perpetuating thing.
Good time.
Going back to the earliest days, RS Classic, it wasn't being marketed. Andrew did not have a marketing department. In fact, as of 2005, 6, 7, I think there still wasn't a marketing department. RuneScape grew because players told each other about it. The mini clip phase, for example, now that was a genuine bit of marketing, if you will.
That's where I found the game.
Well, quite. The game, a deal was done whereby RuneScape was available on mini clips. Suddenly, lots more people got their eyes on it, and a lot more people started playing it. But as RuneScape 2, newly out, was the 3D online game you could play without having to install anything. And then you could play it on school computers, which meant that suddenly everyone in your school would be seeing this game. And that did very, very well for us. So kudos to the business minds who got RuneScape on Miniclip. obviously there were complaints from players saying, "Oh my God, we're getting all these idiots coming in who don't know how the game should be. They're going to ruin the game. The game's going to die. Jagex are going to kill the game." This is 2004. People were predicting the death of the game. I mean, they're probably still waiting for the death of the game so they can say they were right all along and that we should have listened to them and kept it small in RS Classic, because that would have been clearly better. I guess maybe that's what they're waiting for. But
they can't have much else on if that's what they're hoping for.
Maybe they take up playing World of Warcraft. But players brought each other in, and what you describe with the streamers for Old School seems very much in keeping with that. The game that is popular by being what the hell it is, rather than by setting out to be what received wisdom says it should be. I mean, Andrew's description a long time ago was he thought there should be an online game with some sort of 3D-ish graphics. He couldn't find one, so he made one, RS Classic.
Well, I guess Devious Mud before that as well.
Oh, quite. But more 3D-ish graphics for the rather than the what's it called, orthogonal?
I guess so. It wasn't 2.5D, was it? Because it was literally. No, it would. Yeah, orthogonal sounds about right.
Kind of squarey grid thing. It was a game people just could play, found a lot of other people playing, showed each other, and that stood it very well. Relying on a marketing spend of $100,000 on this kind of advert and trying to track how many players it brings in the hope that they, through their membership subscriptions, will be worth more than $100,000 spent on marketing to them. Well, it's a real thing. And I know some colleagues who are jolly good at it, but RuneScape got where it was through the players doing it before there was a marketing team. That's not to take away from the achievements the marketing team now does have, but it's not how we got here. There's also a certain countercultural thing when Old School came out. Arguably, Old School was the RuneScape that Jagex doesn't want you to play. It's not the one that's featured on the website. It's the underground one, the game that you play to stick it to the man, the game you play to spite Jagex for the exact same subscription fee. Thank you. And people were playing Old School RuneScape to, well, maybe as a protest in some places, and they told their friends we were out there. There was marketing being done. Modmac told me that it was getting pretty good returns, although maybe it was getting some of that because of player peer pressure as well, working along with the actual formal marketing. Either way, it got us a Old School community, and I'm very pleased that I was working some pretty funky hours when Old School came out. We had a team of 3 at one point.
Yeah, I remember the was it the couch Q&As or there was one in the pubs.
On the couch.
Yeah, God, they were the days.
Yeah. These days we could sit in the office and have social distancing. I'm thinking with a team that small. But there wasn't anyone with a big book of how to run your retro MMO. No one had done it to this scale before. We didn't know we were going to still be there 6 months in. The expectation was launch at the end of February, nice numbers throughout March. The Q1 figures will look good. The executives going to the quarterly board meeting will have something pleasant to talk about. Doesn't matter if it stays or dies or what. Obviously, Ash, try and retain the players if you can, but the expectation was that we'd move back to the other RuneScape, and when the players drifted away from Old School, they'd come in if their nostalgia hit, which they did. A lot of them would drift away again, which also happened, and it was expected to just slump down and remain a tiny little core of hardcore players who didn't need support or anything, and we'd get moved back to our previous roles, or at least we hoped we would. Mod Reach, he was quality assurance. He asked for and got a signed letter from his manager stating that when Oldschool went down the Swanee, he'd be allowed to move back to his role in RS3 and not to be threatened with redundancy. I asked for the same. They said no. So now, obviously, history being what it is, I'm still bloody there.
Yeah.
He's not.
Well,
I never held it against him. He got this, by the way. I thought it was a rather good idea. When I was a bit sore with my manager, he wouldn't give me one.
I mean, I assume that they kind of knew that you weren't going to get that chop if it came to it anyway, because you were so valuable. Even then, you were still very valuable to the RS3 team in the job role you were in.
I wasn't very engaged in early 2013, bear in mind. I didn't like some of the stuff that happened in 2012. And I went into 2013 very much with a mindset of, I'm going to stay here till my mortgage gets past the fixed interest stage. And then interest rates being what they are, I can be a lot more relaxed about my finances for a bit. So at that point, I'll leave and work for some other company, any other company, probably retrain as an accountant, start at the bottom of the rung and do my AATs and try to work up to the point where however many years later I'm a chartered accountant earning something nice again. That was the vision in 2013. Then Oldschool comes out and suddenly, oh, my job's got fun again. All right, I'll stay here. So I didn't quit. And I think Jagex would have done reasonably well to be rid of me at the end of 2012 if they hadn't had Oldschool coming up.
Oh, because of the engagement levels you had and stuff.
If you've got an employee who doesn't want to be there, doesn't like you, is really just serving their time until they can go do something else, you probably don't want them. I mean, obviously, 2012, I was still pulling my weight. I knocked out Connolly and Rising. I knocked out the big chin chomp, but Slayer contracts was one of mine. I've actually got compliments on its code even years later from somebody who knows how to do good code. And thought that I'd written it massively more expandable than he thought I would have done. And it was very useful for his project. So, no, I was certainly functioning as a content developer, but I wasn't clued into Jagex's culture or interests or vision. And this was little secret. So, no, I think they'd have been perfectly within their rights to quietly take me aside and see if they wanted to make me an offer to quietly go away. And basically, that's what I was hoping for. So, but then Oldschool turns up and suddenly, oh, I like this. I'm engaged in this. And, you know, Jagex never actually seemed to be wanting to be rid of me. I'm sure if they wanted rid of me, they'd have done something about it. As it was, it was a bit suboptimal to have around the place in 2012. And 2013, I started being more valuable. And they've been grateful to me, and they're welcome.
So is the community, definitely. The community is as grateful, I'm sure. It's always an interesting thought process, I guess, when I'm thinking about Oldschool and how, again, the abnormal style of its development in this day and age and its growth, etc. Which then brings me on to the question of, again, you might not be the right person to ask about this, because I know it's not really I think I've had this conversation before with you on Twitter, actually. You were kind of saying how not really your area of expertise / time invested, but esports. Obviously Deadman was a success until it wasn't, etc. But with Method now signed, I'm not sure if you've seen this, Method have signed a couple of, Method being an esports, very large esports team, have signed a couple of Oldschool content creators now, and they've got like an Oldschool wing of players. They're going to be setting up events and everything along those lines. Is there ever discussions in the office or out of the office now, I guess, about the bringing that esports thing back? Because there's no argument that it wasn't successful for a time, and it was more of it wasn't the idea that failed it. It was more of the again, no insult meant, but execution of it from a standpoint of having two very hard decisions to make, having a very hard decision to make, and unfortunately making one that who knows what the other one would have done, but you've now got leagues from it, so actually it could be said to be not such a bad decision. Do you see maybe leagues becoming esport, or?
I think leagues might be too big to be a spectator esports. Now, a more self-contained competition designed like a league, but with a much faster progress rate, so it runs over days rather than months. Maybe that could be something that spectators would want to clue in for. The thing with Deadman is that at one point, for a while, we were doing 4 of those a year. There was almost no dev time between them to turn around, redesign, change things. Players would want things changed. Now, a lot of the things they wanted done, we couldn't with the infrastructure we've got, the technology we've got. There was no way in hell we were going to be able to get that technology help. We still haven't got it now. But also, a dead man would only have maybe hardly any dev time available before it had to start again in order to fit within its quarter. Players were pretty clear that this was not what they were wanting, and cutting down from 4 per year, the answer wasn't 0 per year. That was probably a knee-jerk reaction to the last ones being, well, at least one fiasco, and various other just generally scuffed rather than pure fiasco. And I don't have a problem with calling it a fiasco.
I mean, I think everyone would admit it was, but it was, in the grander scheme, the amount of successes compared to it in every other aspect is it's minimal.
Hey, better to have done some good ones than never done any at all, I'm thinking. Though I am sorry for the people who worked hard on the ones that didn't go well. And I mean, as players rather than just programming. So, no, I regret that the knee-jerk response was kill this damn thing, because having stopped it, that wasn't the right place to go. What we should have gone for is fewer of them, but more dev time on it. Now, 2020, suddenly the world hits a pandemic, and we've got pressure from top brass to do something that will engage the players now. When faced with the question of do we engage players in April with something that's okay, or do we wait 6 weeks while players find other games to get onto, and maybe have something come out in July that will engage people for the pandemic? Well, I can see why they wanted Deadman ASAP rather than let's do all the design that players ever mentioned in the last 2 years and launch it sometime in the summer. Because the pandemic, the international lockdowns, that was an opportunity that I would understand the studio going for. So yeah, the 2021 was very much like what's gone before. Only a bit more polished, because we'd actually got staff available to us with more experience of running competitions. People we didn't have back when the various fiascos took place. Now, looking forward to 2021, my boss is very vocal about the fact that he wants a Deadman in it, and furthermore, he doesn't want it to be a copy and paste job. He wants to give us, when we're talking about 4 times more dev time than I've seen on a Deadman before. I don't know what we're going to be able to get into it or what we're not going to be able to get into it. It's a hell of a lot better having Bonsai saying that he wants to see it done like that than in previous years when there was a lot of momentum behind let's speak of it again because look, it went wrong in April. Is it going to be everything everyone's hoping for from esports? I'm not so optimistic about our delivery based on historical trends. But I think it's a hell of a step in the right direction.
Definitely. And would you like to see the game go? Well, I'm guessing you from the way you were describing it, you wouldn't be averse to the game going to an esports, having an esports wing.
Oh, quite. What I think, though, is that the development of that stuff ought to be reasonably aligned with the development of everything else. Like, we are not short of developers who would love to be on that kind of thing. And the team is generally very happy that Bonsai's putting this in the schedule for 2021. I'm not sure when in the schedule, by the way, but it's in there. And whenever people are saying, what should we drop to help us be more likely to hit all the projects on time, no one ever said drop that one. So I think it's going to stay and get that dev time they're talking about. But the team's keen to do it. What I don't want to see is to have the team that does real content, fingers quote, scary quotes around that, versus the team that does esports without talking to the first lot, because that's how you end up with, an update launched halfway through your competition that completely redesigns the competition in a way that the esports team didn't know about. I mean, we haven't got this right for things like King of the Skill, but at least we were trying to identify the things. There were changes that were not identified as having that impact, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse than it was if we hadn't even scheduled to avoid skilling updates in the middle of it.
I assume with a growing team, as has been described by several members of the Oldschool team, that is just more of a possibility as time goes on in terms of dev time and devs being on certain parts and on other parts. Even though I realise those devs or the staff that are going to be hired do also have specific roles that are very valuable to the main game, that there will just be more bodies kind of ready to work.
There'll be more bodies, yes. We have many more than when there were three of us. The thing is, the game also has needs that are not immediately obvious. Now, new player funnel. We've got a lot of data from the launch of mobile that shows players come in, try it on the new platform because they're exposed to it on this new platform, find tutorials a bit clunky, can't work out what they're meant to be doing, quit it, play something else. There's things we've identified we could improve about the tutorial. We've actually done quite a lot of them last year. We put it on hold for 2020, feeling that with the various international lockdowns, it would be more valuable to engage existing players and not put the time right now on the new player funnel. But we need to go back to that because while there are players who will take the line of no, new players are bad because new players are idiots, and if Dragon is catering to them, not catering to me, well, respectfully to those players, I'm afraid we're not just going to cater to you. We would like this community to actually be able to grow, because with the best will in the world for those players who feel that they are the customers we should have, no more are required, they're not immortal. They may have life events that take them away from the game. We would like to be able to replace them in the fullness of time. So no, we are going to try and improve the new player funnel. We do it, of course, without too much disruption. When we change Tutorial Island, it's still Tutorial Island. It's still where you go around and talk to those tutors, and they're probably the same ones you remember from years ago. But their wording's being polished up. They might mention a few things they didn't mention before, like bonds exist. That's worth knowing if you're a new player. We added things like the poll booth to it. We might take that out again because a new player can't actually use that.
I do like it's so old school, isn't it? Here's something that you have to learn about, but you're not going to be able to use it for about 3 days. So good luck with that.
Yeah, we might take that out again. That kind of thinking is being done. We've added the adventurer paths. A guy in Lumbridge called John who tells you if you like, you can do these things, and I will give you this sword. It's like a steel dagger or something. And those things you're doing, well, there'll be dynamic help available while you're doing them. You can press a button to make the world map point at the place you're meant to be going to.
I'm assuming that came from Pathfinders and RS3, the idea, at least.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a good shout.
Yeah, but it doesn't get in your face. So if you're a player who knows how the game used to be, remembers Lumbridge from 2004, well, there's a dude standing by the building. The dude might trigger you because it's a change to what you remember, but he's only one little dude, and he doesn't have a flashy icon over his head. He doesn't. It's a compromise that players mostly seem comfortable with. So we're doing that kind of thing, but it's been put on hold for this year. Next year we need to get back to it because Steam is being talked about. It's not my ideal that we launched on mobile, learned what's clunky about our new player experience, and we're not going to get to do enough about it before we go on Steam. I wish that were different. On the other hand, it is better than it was when mobile launched in 2018, so it's not unreasonable to go for this. And there's never going to be a time when it's perfect and right, because you can polish a new game experience forever, and you probably should.
And you guys have been, essentially.
And with more bodies, we'll actually be able to have maybe a dev or two who are perpetually doing that kind of thing, helping keep the game appealing to new players without taking away from what old players get. That's why we want more bodies.
I suppose you come up against a barrier where the player's memory of the game was from when they were, pick a number, but 7 or 8, where it seemed extremely simple to them at that age and rewarding when they found out how to smith iron, or when they got to Taverley for the first time after becoming a member, and now it's like, yeah, so you've got to work out how to kill this this wilderness boss. It's like, do you see do you come a cropper when it comes to, one, the nostalgia factor being a memory of a child, essentially, and secondly, as the skill ceiling raises, the medium and low end content suddenly becomes so much more simple and attainable for existing players. So for instance, I can't even remember what I was doing. I think I was doing Motherlode Mine the other day, and thinking this time, however long ago it was when Motherlode Mine came out, 15. Sorry,
I think 2015.
Yeah,
maybe 2014.
Just after Iron Man, or before.
Iron Man was October 2014, so
2015. Yeah, sort of thinking this is a lot easier than it should be. I don't know if that's something that a lot of players go, it's becoming more like RS3. I'm not saying it's becoming more like RS3, because it's still got a very different feeling to it, and it's still not, you're not getting 12k XP drops for doing a simple task. You actually have to, you do get those drops in old school, but there's a lot of earning that. Whereas RS3, in some cases, it's just continuous, 4 or 5 digit XP drops for seemingly nothing. Not my opinion, but just what I've heard. But do you find that to be a recurring theme of players saying, well, actually, it's now getting easier than it should be?
It comes up, but to be honest, we don't do a whole lot of changes to how you train an existing skill on that scale. Motherlode Mine was quite a rarity in that regard. A lot of things we've added, skilling updates, you can make wooden shields with dragonhide on and stuff. They are not so common. And when we do one, it gets discussed very heavily. Take the volcanic mine, for example, mining Todd is being called, although considering printed Todd is based on German words for winter's death. I think it'd really be Bagger Todd if we wanted to use the same. Anyway, I don't actually speak German, but you pick up random shit. And
I'm surprised you speak almost every other language under the sun. So.
I really don't, but yeah, Winter Todd came about because I've been listening to Schubert's song cycle Winterreise, Winter's Journey, and I know the word Todd, and it seemed like this cool idea for a really, really cold killing spirit somewhere in the north. I originally envisaged it as a Fremding thing, actually, but it got used for Zaya by a different developer, and fair play to him, it's gone down, it's plenty used. Anyway, when Volcanic Mine was being discussed, players had a lot of input about what XP rates would be acceptable for it, what you'd have to be doing in order to earn those XP rates, what kind of techniques you could use that would let you get more XP, etc. And frankly, that was discussed pretty darn thoroughly before we got it through a poll. Now, the difficulty over there actually arose sometime later when we add, better pickaxes to the game. Better pickaxe makes mining better. And some said, no, that area of the game, that Volcanic Mine was polled with these XP rates. Now you've added a new pickaxe that gives higher XP rates. That's not what the Volcanic Mine was meant to be. And we took the view, no, new pickaxe is meant to give more gains. Why would that place be different? So, no, it's your promise. It would give this much. Well, it did. And then this other poll offered upgrade. Anyway, that debate still goes on. But no, I don't think we would get to go overboard on changing skills in that way, because when we come to offer it, players know what they're looking at and will comment. And I sincerely believe if we offer something that's unreasonable, there will be enough comment that will get warned in advance to change the plan.
I assume it's just a change of momentum from getting to 99 to now end game content after 99 as well, which is quite a good sort of gives you endless scope to then go, well, we'll add something harder, then we'll add something harder.
We don't tend to look much beyond 99, but we do look at skills that are incredibly labor intensive, because where there's something that's really, really labor intensive that gets you high gains, that means there's a scope where we could do something that's lower gains but less labor intensive or less monotonous.
Hence Winter Todd, which is I think every Iron Man, especially everyone I've had at least, is gone, right, what's the first thing? And it used to be when Iron Man opened up, it would be, Waterfall, start doing some Slayer, maybe do the Known Quest series, do the Stronghold. It's now just 50 fire making, get the Clue Hunter straight to Todd, which is not a bad thing at all.
When I first pitched the idea of a really, really cold killing spirit, which you have to survive to be around, and you have to use various skills in order to make the things you use that are used to fight it as a group. I'd like there to be more skills involved and more survival in the terrain around it rather than just the room it's in. But of course, my vision might have been a hell of a lot less popular than what we actually launched. So fair play to the devs who put it together. It is not quite what I thought I was. It is not the same as the vision I'd have had. But again, it may be more popular than what I'd have done.
I guess, and I guess the joy of this game is that I'm sure in the future you will have exactly that update you're envisioning come to pass.
I don't really mind if I don't. I've got other ideas.
I will say this is the last question now, because this half an hour has turned into nearly 2, which is, well, it doesn't have to be the last question.
Frankly, my question is going to be, how do I use this recording thing to send you the footage?
I'll just, what I'll probably do is it will save as a file, and I'll DM you my email, my university email, and then I think if you just email that.
As long as the file doesn't get lost in some way, that would be embarrassing at this point. We'd have to do it again.
Oh, what a shame. I mean, to be honest, I'd be definitely happy to do it again if you are enjoying yourself, and I'll come slightly more prepared. If you're right to keep going, just tell me when to stop, really, because I
wouldn't mind if we did make this last question, though, because I'm thinking about having some food today.
Oh yes, of course you haven't eaten. That's a very fair point.
I'm a lunch person.
And now you've mentioned Dunkin' Donuts, I feel like I should probably have something to eat as well. So the last question, it's something I think that Mod Matt K initially envisioned, and I've actually been coming up with some like proposal / concepts for it. It's the idea of a RuneScape mode where you had to stay fed, warm, fed, warm, dry, in terms of, you know, certain areas like Mauritania having being a bog essentially, and you know, the having to sleep. That was a big one. Was that because that was quite a passion project of Matt's, I believe, at one point, wasn't it, to try and push for that? Was it Matt? I hope I haven't got the wrong person there.
Honestly, I have no recollection of Matt talking about that. That said, I do remember designs floating around for survival area, which I think this is the kind of thing that he described here.
I think he was talking about Relica specifically, or the Relica area specifically.
Well, it seems like a rather good thing to theme around the Fremdix. Very good for the Fremdix, in fact.
What would your if you could have? So that was my example of what I'd love to see. If you could have anything in game, I guess, game mode, update, event, what would it be?
I want a lobby.
That's fair. That's fair.
Now, there may be, I'm a slightly techie guy at times, and I like user interface work. I also hate user interface work sometimes, but mostly I love it. And when you log into the game and the message of the week screen comes up, you know, you're in the game already. You're just looking at a thing that blanks out your entire screen and tells you the message of the week and some other random stuff, and maybe a plug for some content that we're proud of. I want you not to be in the game while that's going on. And if you were in a lobby like RS3's got, with the ability to chat, you know, public chat to other people in the lobby, why not? Private chat channels. I want you to have access to that without being in the game world. Means that we can maybe even have a bank bin check before you proceed into the game world. I don't know exactly what RS3's technology can do in that regard, but it seemed manageable to me. And I want you to have a world switcher that's not the current one on the login screen, you know, with all the little bullet-shaped things that you can't read. With the lobby screen, we can filter it based on your character's attributes, have more things stored like your favorites, do the things we can do on an in-game interface, but before you're in the game, it feels to me like a very big win. Now, it's had some objections from players. I think they were afraid that we'd have big advert banners in there advertising other parties' products, which we won't. As far as I can tell, we stopped all that kind of thing long ago because there's no money in it and it's inconvenient. So I think we dumped most of that stuff. Anyway, yeah, I'd like a lobby if I could have anything. I think mostly it would go down all right too.
I think it also opened the door for, from my understanding, for clan citadels, or not clan citadels, but a clan hub as well, I guess, could be created after a lobby.
Well, we've already got a clans update due next year.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it would have been nice if it was this year, but the pandemic changed quite a lot of plans this year for a lot of people in a lot of ways, especially with the the perceived need to pause the longer term investment and make the most of the customers who've come in for the lockdowns by engaging them in the more immediate term, even if it means that things we want to do end up being moved a few months into next year.
I feel that was a good decision personally, but
I regret it was necessary. I'd have loved to have enough bodies to do all of the things. But hey, why would I not want to be able to do everything rather than just some things? I understand why it was done, and frankly, clans in 2020 would always have been a stretch. We'd been aiming for like September and probably not hitting it, I think. So the fact that it is officially in next year is something that may well have happened anyway.
Good news. Good news.
Well, it's happening. Anyway, you mentioned a clan hub. Inevitably, with clans, we are going to need to have a place where clan things are put. Now, RSV did it south of Falador. We're thinking that our Grand Exchange doesn't take up as much of the space as theirs did when it went to the four hubs rather than one. We've still got the one hub. And that means we've got a lot of empty space towards the southwest of the Grand Exchange within the walls. If we put our clan hub there, it might be more accessible. And I mean, unless players really feel, no, south of Falador is where clan things go, that's how it must always be. Hey, well, we'll listen to that. But we'd like to discuss alternatives.
Definitely.
I don't really care wherever it goes. But we're expecting a sort of clan hub like that.
Oh, excellent. I'm as I said, that was definitely the last question because you've got to eat, and actually, I've just realised I've got to be up at 6:45 tomorrow morning, so I better be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm trying to work out how to get this footage to you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you again. It's really nice, just on a personal level, to catch up. It's been a long old period of time, and who knows? I'm actually thinking this might be something to put out anyway because it's just quite an interesting thing, and I will bleep out certain words if you are okay if that going out. Yeah, and who knows? Maybe this will happen again because I've certainly had a very good time, and it's been so long since I've kind of been asking questions to people in a podcast style. It was a bit rusty, but I mean, if you're wanting to do, sorry,
I've never done a podcast.
Well, but yeah, you are the god Ash, so anything you touch turns to instant gold. Apart from maybe gold, because that's that weirdly turns to nickel.
That would be funny.
That's how they got the idea, actually, isn't it? But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and who knows, maybe this will happen again. If not, I'm planning after the pandemic anyway to come up to Cambridge and see a friend. So I'm sure I'll see you then when it's safe to.
Cool. Well, thanks for a lovely evening, and all the best.
Yeah, you too. And I'll message you if feel free to do if you want to do this again. It'd be amazing.
Sure.
And I'll send you the finished product as well. Well, if you're all right with me uploading it onto YouTube edited, then I might do.
Honestly, I haven't said anything in here that I would worry about players. Frankly, I said a hell of a lot more controversial stuff on Shawnee's stream.
Oh God, yeah, I remember. I have to see that. That was one of the things that I was going to watch for research for this, but one of my edits for one of my groups just it took up most of the day. Anyway, thank you again, and enjoy your food.
Thanks.